Well, thanks for joining us this week, or this episode. I'm not saying they're a week apart anymore. We might be throwing these together. We're getting a lot of them piling up. But of Dream Farm, and I mentioned in the first episode that we have sponsors, and I forgot to mention it in episode 2. Dream Farm is brought to you by Whitetail Institute Food Plot Blends, the Hunt Stand Pro Whitetail app, and Hoyt Archery. So they're the ones that you can thank for this, because they're the ones that are footing the bill so I can pay Ethan so he can buy his dream farm. So that's what this is all about.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Okay, we're putting 15 minutes on the egg timer. Ready, go. So last episode we talked about, Ethan was asking me questions about when you're buying an investment property, how long do you hold that for before you sell that and move on to the next piece? Well, there's a legal answer to that, and then there's a practical answer. And the legal answer is within the 1031 code, it's like-kind properties held for investment. So it's got to be, you have to replace something you're selling with something of the same nature. So anyway, the point is, that's point number one. Then the next thing that it says is that the intent can't be to flip it. They don't use that language, but that's basically what they're saying, is that it can't be that your intent isn't that you're just going to keep rolling these things. Well, it's really tricky to prove intent. So that's kind of where this whole thing kind of gets murky. And there's a lot of reasons why you could be intending to hold something forever and then just have to sell it. So it's not like they're holding your feet to the fire on this thing, but the way that the tax attorneys now and the 1031 intermediaries have looked at that is everybody feels like if you own it for a year, then that kind of shows the intent that you have of holding it, for a long term. So, whether that's really, how the IRS would interpret it if you got audited, I don't know, but that's kind of the way that the people who do this stuff feel that you should own it for a year. That kind of shows your intent. That you intend to own it for a while. There's no such thing as owning something forever, so it's silly that there ever could be a law that requires you to prove that you wanted to own something forever. But anyway, point is, you've got roughly a year that you should hold it, and then you shouldn't have any issues later. And you always want to talk to a qualified intermediary. They're the guys that really help you out with the 1031s, but we'll come back to 1031s a little bit more later. That's a good topic. But so now let's get to your situation. Let's say you went to a different part of Iowa and you bought this 80, and you've owned it for a year and a half, and the market kept going up. This property, you've got established a little history there. You got some trail camera pictures of some nice deer. You're showing that the neighborhood that this property in is pretty good. It's time. You think, I've added some value to this. Maybe I added $700 an acre to what this thing is worth, plus the market's gone up and you're a year and a half into it. You don't just sell it. What you do is you try to find a replacement. And now the tricky part is, how do you time these transactions so that you fall within the timeline that's permitted within the 1031 in order to replace one that you sell with one that you're purchasing. So let's go through that real quick too. You have 45 days from the close of the one that you sell to identify the replacement. And you can pick up to 3 replacements. That doesn't mean that you had to have already bought them.
You just have to choose them.
You have to set them up. And there's rules in there too that you can do up to 10 if you purchase X number of them. Like let's say that you want to buy a whole bunch of rental houses and you sold a property for $12 million and you got all this money to play with, and you're like, well, I'm going to buy a bunch of rental houses. Well, you could identify, more than 3, but that falls into a whole different category. Let's just say that in your situation, you can identify 3 properties to replace it, and the total value of whatever you purchase has to be at or above what you sold, or you are going to pay capital gains on that fraction.
Difference.
Yep, on that difference. Yep. So, like, let's say you've got your 80, you want to sell it, and you're like, I see a 240 that looks really nice. I mean, I'd love to own this. It's got some good, timber value on it. I feel like I could buy this at a decent price. I could take, $75,000, $100,000 worth of walnut trees off this. I'm going to go ahead and figure out how to buy this. Well, if you make the offer on that, you have to push that out to give yourself enough time to sell that closing. You have to have some kind of a way to tie that up until you can sell the one that you've got. Because there are reverse 1031s. I don't understand those as well, but there are ways to do it backwards, put it that way. But again, you need a really good intermediary to help you with that. They're the guys that facilitate the 1031. And again, we'll dive into the details at some point. But the other thing you can do, and this is what I did, is I found somebody that was willing to purchase the one that I wanted and hold it until I could buy it from them. So that's the trick, is you kind of want to have somebody in your back pocket that really likes recreational land. They know that you're picking stuff that's got value in it. Because you're out there beating the bushes trying to find it. They're doing something else. Maybe they're running an electronics company or something, they got money. They just aren't out there beating the bushes to find that next piece. So they don't really know what to look for, but they know that you do. So you come to them and you say, hey, I've got this 240 acres that I really want. Can you buy this and then sell me an option to buy it from you within X amount of time, which then gives you time to sell your 80 and buy that 240 from them. So they kind of fill that gap for you. It takes the pressure off, because then you can market that 80 correctly.
Yep.
You don't want to be in a fire sale saying, oh, I got to get rid of this 80 really quick so I can do this 1031 and buy this 240. Well, that kind of defeats the whole purpose, because you might leave some money on the table doing that.
Yeah.
So ideally, you'd have some way to tie up the one that you're trying to buy. And sometimes you can do it straight up with an option with the person who's selling it. If it's not listed, you can say, hey, I'll give you 15 grand if you'll hold this for me at this price for a year. And if I execute it within that year, then the 15 comes off the purchase price. Or maybe you say within a year the price will be this, I'll pay you this much more, to take advantage of land prices going up. There's ways you can structure it where you actually get an option to buy it from the person who's selling it. But the point is, you need to try to find some way to comfortably tie up the piece that you want to buy until you can sell the piece that you've got for sale. Because that's what gets a lot of people in trouble with 1031s, is they find the one that they want and then they do a fire sale on the one that they've got, and at the end of the day, they didn't really come out that much ahead, because they end up taking less than maybe what they could have gotten for the one that they're selling. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So say I bought the 80, just say I bought it this year,
I expect you to,
Yeah. Say it appreciates, 7 to 10% each year.
Yeah.
And in 2 years, that 240 comes up for sale.
Yeah.
Is 2 years, is that like a good time frame? Do you think, it would appreciate in value enough? That's enough time to have enough history to market it?
Yeah. I think every market's a little bit different. And we'll come back around to some of the stuff that I did in that way. But we had properties that people wanted right away. Something that we bought and then the neighbors were like, I didn't even know this was for sale. And we're like, well, it was listed. How did you not know? And they're like, well, we would like to buy this. And it's like, sometimes you'd have properties that changed hands really quick, that had the potential to. So you every market's a little bit different. You might realize plenty of value in a short turn, like in less than a year or a year, it might be that you're planning on keeping it and somebody comes along and says, hey, I really want it. So you don't really know, but yeah, I would say anything over a year, because then you've got a year to run cameras, a year to do the work on the habitat, get the food planted, get some trail camera pictures of the deer there, maybe, have some fun hunting it. You didn't buy it just to sell it. You're going to hunt it too, so you put some time in down there, and when you're in the video business, maybe you film a couple hunts there so that you've got something to show people. Because at the end of the day, the next person just wants to know that they're buying something good. And if you can erase the doubt in their mind that it might not be good, then it makes it more valuable to them, because it eliminates some risk.
So as a landowner, you just said have the conversation. does it happen a lot where people will come up to you and ask if your land is for sale? So like, take my situation. If maybe the opportunity to buy something for a cheaper price is to go like more of an off-market listing, or like a friend of a friend knows this farm is going to be for sale. It's kind of intimidating to go up to Farmer Johnson and just say, I'd like to buy your farm. Does that happen a lot? And, is there a right way to go about that?
I don't know if it does. I never bought land that way. I mean, I bought my neighbor's land that way, consistently.
Because you already had that relationship established.
Yeah. So then, they already trusted me. I'd been in the neighborhood for a couple of years. They saw that I wasn't, acting stupid and, whatever, and I even had one neighbor say that if I would have posted the interior fences, he never would have sold his land to me. I thought that was kind of funny, because that's the old farm mentality is, you trust your neighbor. You don't put a no trespassing sign on an interior fence, because all you're doing is accusing your neighbor of trespassing, not the general public if you put it out on the road, Yeah. So anyway, it's harder to just go up to somebody out of the blue. So no, I don't think I would do that. I think once you've got a home base in mind, like you've got the core, say, of your hopeful dream farm, then I think it makes sense to start putting the word out that you would be interested in more. I know people who run ads in small town newspapers saying, we'll buy land. It's like, they don't get anything, So I think it comes down to just checking with all the realtors. And you're looking at the MLS, and that's a really good way. You're probably going to find what you want from a listing, or people in the real estate business, you might get a little bit of early look at stuff. It's like, well, this is for sale. I've got it listed. I haven't published it on the website yet. Are you interested, Ethan? So the more relationships you've got with realtors, the better, because that's where you'll get quite a few of those. They just like you. They've got 50 people on that list, but they're going to call you, because they like you. That's because of that relationship. Because everybody's trying to get those, first look at any new listing. So creating those relationships is important with realtors. And so anyway, to answer your question, I just don't think you can cold call and buy anything.
Yeah, it's like almost too aggressive that it's like off-putting a little bit.
Yeah. And I think there's a way to do it maybe where you find somebody who you think you're not wasting their time and or, bugging them and just say, hey, I would really love to be in this neighborhood, and buy some land. I'm a young guy, and, do you know of anybody around here that would sell? And they're going to go, well, let me see, there's, so-and-so down the road, right? So it's way less intimidating than coming up to somebody and saying, hey, would you sell me your farm? That's not good. No, I think you can find better ways to do it, where you actually ask them if there's maybe people around that they knew of, and then right away they go, well, I know of me. So, you do have a chance if you do that. I really think it's important, too, on that topic, is you don't want to buy something just because it's cheap. I remember Mark Drury gave me some really, really good advice on that way back in the early days of my own journey. He said, don't buy anything that you're not willing to keep forever, because the next guy that you want to sell this to, he's going to be savvy too, because he might be the guy that wants to keep it, forever. And if there's something like structurally wrong with it, like the neighborhood is bad, or the way that the land lays out is really bad. There's no access, from two different directions. You have to come up through the south end to get to any of your tree stands, whatever it might be. The next guy's going to look at that too, and he's going to say, well, I don't want this. So only buy it if it's something that you're going to be satisfied with keeping for the rest of your life. And that keeps you from buying a lemon, getting stuck with something. So you have to do all that research. You've got to figure out, how good is this neighborhood? I'm buying this for me. I'm not buying this to resell. With that mindset, you're going to come up with a lot better properties that you potentially could resell. And you're not going to get stuck with something that just doesn't make sense. So what else? We're at 27 seconds. Gosh, these go fast, don't they?
I was going to say I have another question, but
let's do it. You got 23 seconds.
So like kind of like wrapping up the core theme of these first 3 episodes is like, be creative with your money. There's creative ways to buy land. What was your bank relationship like with your banker or lender right away? And like how important is that process? Maybe you go to a small town bank and the vice president, is that an important part?
Yeah, we're not going to cover that in 23 seconds. So that's going to be the next episode. That'll be episode 4. Like, how do you get the money to keep moving? And I think they all have a board that they have to report to. So it's not like they can just go, oh yeah, you're my friend, here's the loan, So it doesn't work like that. They've got the FDIC and whatever else that has to look at all these different things that they do. But there are ways to be creative. So we'll come back to that. Well, we appreciate you joining us for another episode. So this was 3, so we're going to hit 4 next. Like I said, another episode of Dream Farm, and we'll see you back here for episode number 4. And remember to always dream big.